This is the latest installment of Reframing Christian Marriage, coming to you live from a hospital bed, having some issues here. So, hey, if you like this video, give me a comment, hit the like button, subscribe to my channel. I'm doing this for you people. I'm in a hospital bed, for crying out loud. Well, in the latest installment, Pastor Dalrock talks about the big gun used in many modern Christian marriages, which is the denial of sex. Denying sex is the modern Christian's wife's go to method of maintaining her control of the marriage. Judging whether her husband loves her sufficiently is an effective emotional manipulation. That's in a previous video. But it lacks the raw power that withholding sex has in the marriage. Now, in 1 Corinthians chapter 7, Paul, the Apostle Paul, neatly frames the morality of sex and how it relates to marriage. And he explains marriage is the one and only safe harbor for sexual desire. It is the biblical answer for those who burn with desire. And because of this, he makes it very clear, the Apostle Paul, that neither spouse is to withhold sex and that each spouse has the authority over the other's body in this regard. And so this is very different then from the modern view that sex is moral if it involves romantic love or somehow in a monogamous relationship with some kind of commitment. As Paul, the Apostle Paul describes it, there's nothing wrong with burning with sexual desire so long as it is directed towards your spouse in a marriage. And as long as you don't defraud your spouse of the marital sex, which is their due. He states that to deny sex to your spouse is to invite Satan to tempt your spouse with sexual sin. I mean, boy, if this was actually taught frequently in biblical marriage counseling, and marriage seminars, can you imagine just the Christian feminists gnashing their teeth at this? As you can imagine, this presents a very obvious problem. How can a Christian wife exercise control of her husband if she can't withhold sex from him? How is she supposed to make him submit to her if she lacks this powerful tool in her arsenal? In fact, as the Apostle Paul explains, she is actually commanded to submit to her husband sexually. Clearly, there must be a mistake then. If there's one thing the modern wife knows is that she really isn't supposed to submit to her husband, despite clear language and the frequency of the command that she is to submit to her husband. And so the Christian feminist goes to work looking for a rationalization. Certainly there must be a loophole we can find. What if she isn't in the mood? While no other command from God requires that we be in the mood to fulfill it, certainly this command must be different. Otherwise, she would have to submit to her husband in a very profound way, in a way which the Book of Oprah explains should only be reserved for the heroes of romance, those gallant knights on the white steeds. But all of this sounds very arbitrary. If one isn't careful, it could sound like manipulation on the wife's part. So she, of course, is a submissive Christian wife, or at least she wants everybody to see and think that. Just maybe not in that way or in any other meaningful way. So there must be another test, something which only she can be the judge of, so that she can deny sex to her husband. And so luckily she has this test in the form of testing the purity of his love. So here's what Pastor Dalrock has to say about that. With a slight adaptation, she can combine the concept of judging the purity of his love with the non-biblical idea that sex gains moral purpose if it is expressed only out of love, not out of that dirty lust that men have and somehow women don't. If her husband wants sex when she isn't in the mood, well, it probably is because she is too tired. Surely he would have a better chance if he did more housework, so she would feel fresh and rested when he made his advances. Also, his need for sex must not actually be a need for sex. If he burns with passion, the Bible tells us marriage is a safe harbor for. His thoughts are probably impure, and so she can turn him away. Christian wives employing denial of sex have another problem, however. The Bible is very clear that this creates an opening for Satan. Yet, if the husband isn't kept sexually unsatisfied, then she will lose much of her power over him to make him submit to her. This means not just denying him the sex which is his due as her husband, but ensuring that he doesn't have any other outlets of release. And what of her own culpability for creating sexual temptation in her husband, contrary to the specific scriptural command? Well, the answer here is to invert the meaning of the command to not deny sex at risk of creating temptation for sexual sin. In this new twisted version of Scripture, wives are commanded not to deny their husband's sex unless the husband is tempted by sexual sin. As Sheila Gregory explains in one of her books, who is one of our top Christian feminists, she says, quote, if your husband uses pornography, then she advocates refusing to have sex with him. Think of it like an alcoholic. You wouldn't offer an alcoholic a drink, so you shouldn't offer a pornography addict something that will feed his addiction. That may sound drastic, but he is committing adultery because he is lusting after somebody else, Matthew 5:28. And the more he has sex with pornography in his mind, the harder it becomes for him to change. And so Pastor Dalrock says, he comments about this, aside from conflating viewing pornography with porn addiction and adultery, her analogy is simply not biblical. Denying a husband who is tempted by porn the healthy sex which is his due as your husband is better compared, this is a good analogy, is better compared to denying someone clean water because they are so thirsty they are tempted to drink out of the sewer. The rebellion of wives in this area is very clear, and Sheila knows it. Yet when Paul's warning comes to pass, meaning the man yields to sexual temptation by viewing pornography, which is wrong, then Sheila Gregory takes that as reinforcing the wife's justification for rebelling and denial of sex. This is an interesting topic, isn't it? What do you guys think? Give me a comment. Give me a like on this if you're agreeing. I need to hear some chat on my comments about this. I think this is a real issue here that Pastor Dalrock is bringing up. But even with all of that, we're going to get this turned around. We're going to get it on the right track. We're going to have biblical roles in marriage again sometime, hopefully soon, because Christ is winning. He is building his church, and the gates of hell will not prevail against it. Until next time, this is the Postmillennial Man.